In 1908, a young journalist sat across from the richest man in America, expecting a 30-minute interview. He left with 3 days of conversation behind him and an assignment that would consume the next 20 years of his life and eventually become one of the best-selling books ever written. Andrew Carnegie's question was simple, almost casually delivered, the way truly enormous requests sometimes are. Would he be willing, for no pay, no guarantee, no promise of success, to track down 500 of the most successful people in the world and find the one thing they all secretly had in common? Most people would have asked for time to think about it. Hill said yes on the spot. His name was Napoleon Hill. This is Think and Grow Rich. Picture this. You've had a goal for years, a business, a career change, a number in your bank account you've been chasing. You've read the books. You've made the vision boards. You've told yourself sincerely that you want it. And somehow, year after year, nothing actually moves. Hill spent 2 decades trying to understand exactly why some people break through that wall, and most people stay stuck behind it, wanting the exact same thing for the exact same reasons, forever. Carnegie didn't just hand Hill a list of names. He made an introduction, one letter vouching for Hill personally. And that single letter opened doors that would have otherwise taken a lifetime to even approach. With it, Hill found himself sitting across from men like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and Theodore Roosevelt, asking each of them, in different ways, the same underlying question. For 20 years, Hill interviewed, studied, and cross-examined the most successful people of his era, looking for the pattern underneath their success. Not their industry. A steel magnate and an inventor and a president had nothing obvious in common on paper. Not their luck, since plenty of equally lucky people around them had achieved far less. He was hunting for the actual mental mechanism that separated them from everyone else who'd wanted the same things and never gotten there. What he found wasn't a strategy or a set of tactics specific to any one industry. It was a state of mind repeated almost identically across 500 wildly different lives. And it's the thing this entire book is actually about. Here's the distinction Hill insists on over and over, because he watched it separate his 500 successful subjects from everyone else. Wanting something and desiring it with burning intensity are not the same thing. Most people want money the way they want a vacation. Pleasant to imagine, easy to abandon the moment something more urgent appears. Hill's successful subjects wanted their goals the way a drowning person wants air. Not negotiable, not abandonable. The kind of want that reorganizes a life around it. He tells the story of a boxer's trainer who, before a fight, told his fighter there was no way to retreat. Burn the boats, in other words, so there's no option left except to win. Hill argues that vague wanting always leaves an escape hatch. The moment things get hard, the mind quietly reaches for it, and the goal gets filed away as maybe someday, instead of abandoned outright, which somehow feels less like quitting, even though the outcome is identical. Burning desire removes the escape hatch entirely. Picture 2 people setting the exact same goal on the exact same day. One treats it as a nice idea, revisited occasionally, easily set aside the moment life gets busy. The other treats it the way a drowning person treats the surface, not optional, not negotiable, the kind of want that reorganizes a calendar, a budget, a set of daily habits around it without needing to be reminded. A year later, only one of them is anywhere close to where they started out wanting to be. Hill noticed something else, almost universally. Across his 500 interviews, none of them built anything significant alone. He called it the mastermind principle. Two or more minds working in deliberate harmony toward a specific goal, producing a kind of intelligence and energy that neither person could access on their own. Hill described it almost like a third mind appearing in the room, available only when the right people aligned around the same outcome, and vanishing the moment any one of them stopped pulling in the same direction. This wasn't networking in the modern transactional sense, trading business cards, hoping something useful comes back eventually. It was a small, deliberately chosen group of people aligned on a single outcome, pushing each other past the point where any one of them would have quit alone. Picture two entrepreneurs chasing similar goals. One works in isolation, every decision made alone, every setback absorbed alone, every late night spent staring at the same problem with no second perspective in the room. The other meets weekly with two or three people equally committed to their own ambitious goals, not for casual encouragement, but for genuine challenge, accountability, and the kind of combined thinking no single person in the room could have produced alone. Carnegie himself credited his fortune to exactly this: a tight group of specific people whose combined knowledge built something none of them could have built individually. He didn't claim to have done it alone, even once, in any account Hill could find. Here's the part of the book that sounds the most unusual on first read, and it's also the part Hill insisted mattered most. He argued the subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a vividly imagined goal and an actual memory, and that repeatedly, emotionally rehearsing a specific outcome programs the subconscious to start recognizing opportunities related to it, almost like training a part of the brain to notice doors that were always there, but previously invisible. This isn't magical thinking in Hill's framing. It's closer to a mechanism, repetition plus genuine emotional intensity, aimed at a specific, clearly defined goal, training attention itself to start working differently. Picture two people who both want to start a business. One mentions it occasionally, vaguely, when the topic comes up at dinner. The other writes the specific goal down, reads it aloud daily, pictures the exact outcome in concrete detail until it carries real emotional weight, not as a ritual for its own sake, but because Hill's research suggested this repetition genuinely changes what a person notices walking through an ordinary day. The relevant conversation overheard at a coffee shop. The opportunity that was always technically available, but never registered as relevant before. Neither person's external world changed, only one of them was actually paying attention to it. There's a moment near the end of this book where Hill brings the entire 20-year project to a single point. He writes that whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. A sentence that's been quoted so often it's almost lost its weight, printed on posters and coffee mugs until it sounds closer to decoration than argument. But inside the actual argument of the book, it isn't a slogan. It's the conclusion of 2 decades spent watching 500 specific people in 500 different industries prove it true, one at a time, under circumstances nothing alike except for the mental state underneath them. The difference between his 500 successful subjects and everyone else who'd wanted the same outcomes wasn't talent, luck, or birth circumstance. It was the refusal to let the goal stay vague, burned into a specific, emotionally intense desire, supported by people aligned around the same outcome, rehearsed until it became something the mind started actively working toward instead of passively wishing for. Most people quit, Hill observed, at the exact moment right before the breakthrough, not because the goal was wrong, but because the wanting was never burning hot enough to survive that moment. He saw this pattern so consistently across his interviews that he gave it its own name, the point of greatest resistance, almost always arriving right before the point of greatest reward, which is precisely why so few people ever actually reach the reward at all. Somewhere in the last few minutes, a goal of your own probably surfaced, the one you've wanted for years, sincerely, and never quite reorganized your life around. Hill's argument isn't that wanting it harder will summon it from nowhere through sheer mental force alone. It's narrower than that and more useful. Vague wanting and burning desire produce different lives, even starting from the exact same goal, the exact same starting resources, the exact same opportunities. If this gave you something worth sitting with, subscribe, because the next video on this channel might be the next piece of the pattern nobody ever clearly laid out for you either. See you in the next minute.